I think we are now live. I think people are connecting to the session. So while waiting for everybody to tune in, let me start by saying that, well, first of all, welcome back. We had very interesting discussion during the morning about food security and then international relations and geopolitical issues across Asia. And now we are back for another discussion with fantastic speakers about social inclusion and economic development across Asia. We are here with Professor Akiko Yamanaka, former Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Japan, and also Special Advisor to the President of my organization, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. She has been a leader in a number of fields, from gender and women inclusion and empowerment, international relations, peace building, and security. She will give introductory remarks, and then we will go straight into the conversation with other leaders from Asia. Veronica Mendizabal, senior gender expert from the Asian Development Bank. Mahmoud Hasan from UNDP Bangladesh, working on youth and entrepreneurship, and also Neha Bansal from the Secretariat of the India G20. As you know, India has been the G20 president this year, so we really look forward to hearing from her and her experience. I can see that Akiko is just back, so let me now give the floor to Professor Yamanaka for our introductory remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed for your kind introduction, Giulia. When I read the title of the session 3, Fostering More Inclusive and Just Societies, I immediately thought of the original concept of human securities of UNDP in 1994. Not only we Asian nation states, but also the United Nations itself have to come back to this original concept, because we are in a very difficult world community. The rapidly evolving geopolitical and economic landscape, coupled with post-pandemic recovery taking place at different speeds across different regions, and increased economic and geopolitical rivalries require new approaches and new thinking to address global challenges. The ongoing climate crisis, in combination with the brutal war in Europe, have highlighted the vulnerability of nations who are too dependent on certain energy solutions and the need of cooperation across national borders. Therefore, let me explain about the human security briefly. Albert Einstein summed up the discovery of atomic energy with characteristics simplicity. He said, "Everything changed. We shall require a sustainable new manner of thinking if mankind is to survive." This means that human beings have to change the concept of development from only depend on scientific development to more humane development. Based on this Einstein's words, the UNDP's 1994 Human Development Report's definition of human security argues that the scope of global security should be expanded to include threats in 7 areas: economic security, food security, health security, environmental security, personal security, community security, political security. And I would like to add 2 more threats in 2023, water security and energy security. And it is obvious that this session focuses on more personal security and community security. Personal security aims to protect people from physical violence, whether from the state of external state, from violence individuals and sub-state actors, from domestic abuse, or from predatory adults. This includes security of human rights such as gender, religion, nationality, and color of skin, and so on, as well as crime and violence. Community security aims to protect people from the loss of traditional relationships and values and from sectarian and ethnic violence. In order to avoid these threats, we need community security that can allow us to develop people's awareness, education, vocational training, and entrepreneurship, and so on, so that everyone can live in a safe community, whoever he or she is. We should admit that Asian democracy, as far as protecting individual freedom, equality of people, and the rights of minority groups based on law, can be recognized. Therefore, we have to establish societies where everyone can choose the way of life that makes him or her happy. The World Conference on the UN Decade for Women was held in Nairobi, Kenya in 1985, with non-governmental organization representatives attended, where I was one of the youngest. The highlight was a speech by the conference Secretary General Leticia Shahani of the Philippines, who recently passed away. She said, "Peace is not a situation where there is no war. It is women who can teach our children the reality of war and peace as genuine teachers. True development is social, cultural, and political, as well as economic. Equality between men and women is not simply the absence of discrimination. Rather, equality means granting women the right, opportunity, and responsibility to take part in their own development. Let us discuss today how we can establish the Asian way of fostering more inclusive and just society. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Yamanaka. I see already our panelists nodding at what you were saying. I think this was the perfect introduction to our conversation. And now perhaps, we can start with Veronica from the Asian Development Bank. I think it's a perfect segue to what Professor Yamanaka was discussing. Can you perhaps give us an idea of the activities you are developing to support women empowerment in the region?
Thank you very much, Giulia, for the invitation to join this panel and to contribute to the conversation. And good afternoon from Cambodia, everyone. I would like to start by thanking Professor Yamanaka for the insightful remarks. And in line with her message, let me start by sharing that the Asian Development Bank, ADB for short, is committed to a prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable Asia and the Pacific. To achieve this, we are looking at addressing poverty and inequality in the region, accelerating gender equality, and fostering regional cooperation. So to your question, Giulia, on ADB's work on gender equality, on women's empowerment, for us at ADB, it is clear that the social and economic costs of gender inequality are too high. Some estimates have put this or have suggested that Southeast Asia could actually leverage a collective GDP of $370 billion a year by 2024 if gender inequality would be eliminated. But progress has been far too slow, as we all know. And actually, reading this year's gender gap report of the World Economic Forum, this report basically tells us that globally, we are still 130 years away from closing the gender gap. And in Asia and the Pacific, the figure is even higher, and we're looking at about 190 years to achieve gender equality in the region. And of course, this is unacceptable. For this reason, at ADB, our long-term commitment is to consider gender equality across the spectrum of our work, from policy dialogue all the way to the design of projects. And how do we do this is by exploring and trying to maximize opportunities to boost gender equality in all of our loans, grants, and technical assistance. And I am actually proud to share that in the past 2 years, 90% of all of our operations in Southeast Asia were able to fully mainstream gender. We want infrastructure to work for women. Our transport projects, for example, undergo extremely rigorous due diligence to ensure that public transportation services are affordable, reliable, and safe for women. Now, beyond gender mainstreaming, ADB is also working to address the root causes of gender inequality. As such, our health projects, for example, promote sexual and reproductive health and rights. And we are increasingly looking into supporting efforts to address gender-based violence, specifically domestic violence. Now, as you know, ADB has announced its ambition to deliver $100 billion in climate finance by 2030. So this will make us the climate bank in Asia and the Pacific. And as such, we're exploring the intersection of gender equality and climate change and the net zero transitions that will be needed in the region. We want to make the large scale change that we so urgently need to keep to the global targets. We want to make these changes work for women. And we're looking into 3 areas of engagement from the gender inclusion angle, including accelerating access to clean energy for all, pushing for more women in STEM and fields related to the transition, and finally, we're supporting more women voices and leadership to shape transition plans. Let me stop here.
Thank you very much, Veronica. I'm personally getting increasingly interested in the role of women in the green transformation. We did interesting work on the role of women in the digital economy, and there are some very interesting links. I mean, as you said, I mean, STEM skills in the tech field are very much needed for the green transformation, and unfortunately, this is still an area where women are not getting equal access, and definitely, I mean, we need to work together to have a better understanding of the situation and how to fix the issue. But as we heard at the beginning from the introductory remarks of Professor Yamanaka, this session is about, thinking about how to build more inclusive societies and communities in Asia. We talked about including women, but we also know that there are other groups that are underrepresented. And this is why now I would perhaps move on and continue the conversation with Mahmoud, because I would be very curious to hear more about the work that he's doing with UNDP to actually empower and include youth in his country. Over to you, Mahmoud.
Thank you, Giulia. Thank you, esteemed panelists. Very good to be here. So let me begin with 3 stories, and let me explain it in a very short and concise manner. So let me tell a story of a woman coming from 450 kilometers away from the capital city of Bangladesh. Her name is Champa Begum. So when she was 5 months pregnant, she was divorced by her husband, and she was forced to go live to her places, and she was forced to take shelter at their parents' houses. So understand the situation of the women living in extremely one of the most poverty-prone area of Bangladesh. And so when the situation was dire for her, so she came to know one of the intervention of UNDP implemented in collaboration with the local government of Bangladesh, and it's called SHOPNO. So while taking part or get included in the SHOPNO's intervention, she received training on agriculture management, business management, and livestock management. So while she was receiving the training, she was able to save some money because the training itself comes with few incentive who were receiving the training. So she used to save roughly $222. After receiving the training, she opened up a tea stall at her rural community area. and then started earning. So now she has a stable income of monthly around I think it's around $180. And while the saving with the money that she has started the business, converted into the total capital of her value of this market of the shop is now nearly $2,000. So this is a story how we are working with the rural women of Bangladesh. And this is not the one single story. So far, we have 22,000 stories like the story I have shared of Champa Begum. Coming up with the second story. So when the COVID hit it hard, back in the pandemic era, so the small medium enterprise, and mostly Bangladesh has a huge informal economy. It's 80% is coming from the informal economy of our total economic value. The small medium enterprise owner, mostly led by the women, was highly impacted because suddenly their business, they had to shut down their businesses. They had no way how they could have taken their operational, keep the business operational. Realizing the situation, and when we see particularly the story of Kanta Choudhury, who used to create a number of products and sell and had to shut down her operation, realizing the situation, we developed an online marketplace and connected all the women across the country and giving them a marketplace where they can re-operationalize their shutdown business. So far, through the platform of Anandamela, an online marketplace that UNDP has created in collaboration with Ministry of Commerce and other ICT division, has trained over 30,000 women entrepreneurs, connected them, brought them under one umbrella to advance their business. And now the third story, and from this story I will stop. So another story of Tahwida Shiropa, a young woman who wants to be an entrepreneur, had fantastic idea, but didn't know where she can piece their idea, where she can get mentorship, where she can get funds, where she can connect with this local and global player. And she wanted to do a business which also has an elements to impact the life of people. Her business was focused on bringing mental health service at the doorstep of the people. That's where the UNDP's intervention comes in. UNDP, through the platform of Youth Collab, co-created by UNDP and City Foundation, provides innovation, mentorship, and access to grant support to the new and innovative ideas, which also address the pressing challenges of SDGs. Now, with the support that we have given to Monir since the beginning, now they are one of the leading startup in the Bangladesh ecosystem. And starting from the ashes, now they themselves are training and funding the other small startup. So at the same time, the value of her business with this innovative business model is like providing the valuable services that is required when a country like Bangladesh, where mental health still remains as an underrated agenda. So if I link all these three interventions in one front, we work with the underrepresented and marginalized community who was based in the different parts of this country, particularly the rural women. On the other hand, we also work with the community which has an advanced business model and kind of active in terms of a digital economy and contributing to the digital economy through the Anandamela intervention. And on the other hand, in terms of promoting and supporting the new innovative business idea and entrepreneurship, we are working with these young people, the new bloods coming into this market, supporting them with tailored mentorship, connecting them with local, regional, and global resources to expand their business. So it just addresses one frontier of our work when it comes to women and other marginalized group inclusion in our work process, and that is the economic empowerment. We do have other intervention that cut across in terms of their social inclusion and social and political inclusion. So yeah, I will stop here.
Thank you, Mahmoud. This is very interesting. And I think that the issues we have been discussing so far are somehow very much related to the priorities of the India presidency of the G20. And this is bringing us to Neha. Please, could you tell us more about that? We are very curious to hear from you.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody who's joined. As you rightly said, both the agenda of youth as well as women was very much central to what the G20 was trying to achieve. But I also want to add another important population that is very important when we look at the issue of inclusivity, which is that of elderly people. So 2018 onwards, we have many more people above the age of 65 than we have below 5. And by 2030, we would have 1 in 6 people over the age of 65. So when we are looking now at the issues of inclusivity, that component has to be built in, in our policies and things like that. So that's the context with which I want to start. But the first point I want to focus on is a learning that we've all had from the G20, which is the consequence of development. My esteemed panelist and also Professor Yamanaka spoke about, first of all, the need and the fact that progress on, for instance, gender has been very slow. And different, and the fact that we need new models. But I want to focus on the fact that we have made some progress and development, and that is having certain consequences. So again, starting with the story, which is that when India took over the presidency of the G20, we recognized that the SDGs were completely off the mark. As you know, we are only sort of touching some sort of progress on 12% of the SDGs. So a lot of us as policy specialists decided that, okay, one transformational aspect would be to have women as participants. So we coined the word, which is women-led development. It seemed like a no-brainer, and it seemed that, this was one of those low-hanging fruits where we would get consensus from most members. But when we went to the flow of negotiation, we found great pushback for the agenda on women-led development. It pointed to the fact that while one of the consequences of the progress that we are making on gender youth agendas is fear. So, and we're seeing that on different fronts. And let me explain that. So when the whole agenda of women-led development was placed in front of the G20, a lot of countries, and I would not name them, but many countries said that this would indicate that we are giving women a preferential position at the cost of men's participation. And therefore that agenda didn't go forward. There was severe pushback. Related to that is a study that is done called the Rajvik Index. And this study serves the G7 and some parts of it flow into the G20 as well. And this is a study done with about 40,000 respondents, mainly across the G7 countries. And here again, the study results found that most people did not want to have women in leadership positions. And it didn't come from stereotypes. So the details of the questions were such that is it coming from a certain way of thinking? It didn't attribute itself to stereotype. It didn't attribute itself to religion, nor tradition. It actually attributed itself to a certain fear that there wasn't enough of the pie on the table, that in some way women's leadership was seen at the cost of men's participation in the economy. And what is most alarming is that, and very surprising, is that this study really also showed that the population of people who felt this way were young men between the age group of 18 to 25. So it is young people, young men who at least as far as this survey and the study felt, that there isn't a role for women. And just to quickly sum up on that point, which is this being my starting point, which is that let's go down to ground zero and let's see what's happening there. So let's take the case of Afghanistan. And as we know, with the return of the Taliban, a lot of women have lost a lot of rights, education opportunities, etc. And the former Prime Minister of the UK, Gordon Brown, who works on a grassroots program in Afghanistan, which is that education can't wait, very funded by the UN and my colleagues who have joined from the UN around the table. And he has been working with both men and both women, and he talks about the fact that it is fear among other populations, and if we don't recognize that in our policy design, we would only be able to go so far. We can put a whole lot of things on the table, but if we don't recognize what is actually opposing those policies, opposing that movement, we could only go so far. So I just want to put that out as the first point and the learning from the G20. Thank you.
Thank you, Neha. Indeed, I mean, very good lesson. We need to have people on board, everyone, if you really want to make a big change. And this is why, you know, the data that Veronica was quoting at the beginning are a bit discomforting, because they really show us that, you know, we are still, there's still, I mean, a lot of work to do to reach this equality. Everybody joining today is probably advocating. So yes, absolutely. Now let's start immediately our second round to try to finish on time. And I see that there's already an interesting question coming from the floor. And this time, I mean, I would like to continue to discuss a little bit the work of the G20, and I would like to do that with Mahmoud. We were together very much involved in a G20 engagement group called Startup 20, especially in the activities of the Inclusion Task Force. So I would like to ask you, Mahmoud, what are your main key takeaways from the work we did this year?
Thank you, Giulia. It is absolutely a rewarding experience being part of this G20 Startup 20 engagement group. So the way I frame it, the formation of the Startup 20 group itself and inclusion within the mainstream engagement group of G20, because in the previous G20, there was no Startup 20 group. And the key focus that the Startup 20 tried to address how they could bring the innovation, how they could bring and support the young innovators, entrepreneurs out there. So we are living in a time when the total population of the world, where youth is having the largest share in the history of this world. And when it comes to Asia Pacific, it is more than 50% young people that represents, and how to support them. And then there are a lot of intersectionality into it, and where I would like to take up on. It was not talking about in the Startup 20 engagement group. So the key purpose was to come up with a policy communique of the G20 plus other 8 countries that was invited countries, a common consensus-based policy communique that can create a conducive and enabling environment for all innovator and entrepreneurs. So the task force that we were part of, the inclusion task force of the Startup 20 engagement group, they are kind of bringing the perspective how the policy communique should address and bring the interest of the underrepresented group of this G20 and other countries. And therefore we come up with some of the action items that kind of create enabling environment for the particularly there are groups from transgender community, groups from person with disability, and there are groups from other different diversity and extremely marginalized group. So I think we also propose it's not only about the inclusion from this community, but also to kind of innovation, to kind of support the innovation to bringing service and products that can also addresses the problem of this community. So tying up with both coming from people coming from the underrepresented community and innovation that solve this problem of this community, we had a strong push on this policy communique. So, and it's good to see that in the G20 declaration, the formation of Startup 20 was kind of acknowledged, and the continuation was agreed by the nation. So it was itself a startup for the first year, because this was the first time that happened. And it did a very good job in terms of even bringing participation from different countries, because it was not done by with only few countries. It was truly consensus based. So as it will be taken forward, I think it will have immense potential to kind of materializing all the action point that was put it into this policy communique, and it will drive the agenda of social inclusion, justice. It will create enabling environment for the transgender people, for the LGBTQ community, for the people who lives in the socioeconomic prone poverty areas. So in terms of a booming and startup ecosystem, global startup ecosystem, which is inclusive and addresses the challenges of all kind of people, I think the formation of a Startup 20 would play an important role going forward.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. It was such an exciting journey, and I think it was very interesting to address the issue of inclusion from, very different perspectives. As you said, I mean, different groups should participate, should be included. And we also addressed very much something that I think Veronica mentioned at the beginning, which is the cost of exclusion. So part of our work was really to highlight, the missed opportunities in global innovation ecosystems arising from the fact that some groups of the population are not included enough. I think we need to speed up because there will be a final session, but I would like to ask Neha if she has any reactions, because obviously she was very much involved in the G20 this year. Over to you.
Yes, I think the Startup 20 was a very important initiative that got agreed on. I would just add two more to that. One is when we are talking about young people, the gig economy platform, the recognition of the gig economy platform. You see, what has happened around COVID, a lot of people are opting not to work. Young people are opting not to work. And when you look at the population, the employment, global employment ratio, out of the population that can work, only 50% are working. So one is that they're opting not to work. Secondly, there are transitions. There's the green transition. There's the digital transition where people are not may not be completely trained. And then there's also unemployment. Now, in keeping with this aspect, two aspects were put in. One is the gig economy, like I said, recognition for the gig economy, which is that people will be floating populations. They'll be working on different platforms. There'll be temporary workers, contract workers, and that is extremely important. The World Bank has, I think, sort of indicated that the economy of the gig economy has sort of grown maybe 3 times or 2 times in the last 5 years itself. So it's growing very, very rapidly. The second thing that often gets missed, is a technology development. Now, a lot of conversations that happened were around, okay, we are moving into a time when we need renewable energies. We need, to make this transition into greener times better. And therefore, countries will need technology, and that technology may come from the more developed countries. But if we were only to rely on technology transfer, we would create a divide where young people would then have to start to get trained, capacitized for technology that's coming from another country, not suited to their own country. So very importantly, I think the G20 stress on technology development, which is that countries, both the small, the developing countries, are able to develop technology that is suited to their own economy, that is not just capital intensive, but also labor intensive. And that way it won't become, a sort of hindrance to employment for young people and neither to their skills. So I just wanted to point out these two aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We discussed quite a lot about the G20, but there was another very important summit that took place just a few days before the G20 in India, and it was the summit of ASEAN taking place this year in Indonesia, because Indonesia is the chair of ASEAN in 2023. And this is, a process where my organization has been heavily involved, but also, of course, ADB has been very much connected to. And this is why I would like maybe conclude this second round of question by asking to Veronica about her activity, her support to the Indonesian chairmanship of ASEAN this year, especially vis-a-vis women empowerment. Over to you.
Thanks, Giulia. Actually, ADB and ASEAN were created about the same time, almost 60 years ago. And since then, we have been moving together along the path of integrated regional cooperation. But gender was not an area of cooperation. And so this year, we are delighted to, for the first time, work with Indonesia as ASEAN chair to fast-track the implementation of the ASEAN Gender Mainstreaming Strategic Framework to 2025. With the ASEAN Committee on Women and the Indonesian Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection and a number of development partners, we co-organized the ASEAN Gender Mainstreaming Conference in Yogyakarta in July this year. And it was really a great experience because of the collaborative work, but particularly because we were able to contribute a new perspective and new approaches to try and accelerate implementation of this ASEAN strategic framework for gender. And I would say there were three aspects that were novel and key. The first one focused on assessing the degree of integration of gender at the level of ASEAN sectoral bodies across the three ASEAN pillars of political security, economy, and socio-cultural community. Second, we engaged in dialogue with the sectoral bodies. We actually ran a survey asking for their opinions on gender and how to integrate this in their work. And finally, we helped to prepare policy recommendations for each ASEAN pillar on how to accelerate the implementation of the gender strategy and validated this with the sectoral bodies as well. And we were delighted that this work was recognized in the ASEAN Leaders Statement at the 43rd ASEAN Summit, which highlighted the need to promote gender mainstreaming as a cross-sectoral issue. And it stressed the need to put forward a gender-responsive approach in ASEAN. Now, this follows on the engagement at the G20 in Indonesia last year. So there is a continuum of engagement from our side and commitment to discuss gender equality at the regional level, which is a new development. And we are committed to this discussion. With the strong foundation of this year's support to ASEAN, we look forward to Laos as ASEAN chair next year to continue this collaboration. Again, engagement at the regional level can promote more inclusive and resilient communities in our member countries. Networking among women policy makers across the region is very important, and this dialogue can help define a more inclusive Southeast Asia. Thank you. Over to you, Giulia.
But thank you very much, Veronica. We have just very few minutes left, but I think, we have a little bit of time perhaps to address one of the two questions. There is a question about startups. To the person who asked, please stay connected with us, because at the ERIA, we just launched a new center about the digital economy and sustainability, where we will be working a lot on startup creation and development, also very much with an inclusive perspective across Southeast Asia and Asia at large. So feel free to connect with me through Ravindra. I will be very happy to share more information. And again, let's say new things will be just revealed in the coming months. But then there was another question that I think is very much related to what Veronica just mentioned, because I mean, Veronica and I, we have been trying to collaborate and work together. And I'm sure that since you have been very much involved in the ASEAN chairmanship process, we will find lots of very good excuse to continue our collaboration under the Lao chairmanship. But someone asked actually how basically international organizations can work together to promote and advance this inclusion agenda. G20, ADB, UNDP, organization like mine, ERIA. I think we heard a little bit some takeaways from our speakers, but very, very briefly, maybe 1 minute each before I give the floor back to Professor Yamanaka. Is there anything you would like to add? And maybe, I don't know, Mahmoud, do you want to start?
I think, yeah, very valid question. Well, first, the thing I would like to mention is the collaboration and partnership approach that we need to take. I mean, recently we launched a report on the trends of gender bias, and if you see, still the majority of the people we bear a severe gender bias. So if you see in the root cause, particularly in the context of Asia Pacific countries, we need to work on that to kind of removing the bias on the gender and kind of breaking all these ceiling class. Still, it is very, very dominant if you go into this field. And for that, we need strong partnership. The partnership is already very tight and steadfast. When it comes to UN operation, we very closely work with bilateral partner, multilateral partner. And as we move forward, I think all the organizations that is here, the G20 essentially is a multilateral forum, but organization like the international financial institutions who are playing an important role, like ADB has a very important operation, even in Bangladesh, providing support to the clean energy transition, to gender equality to other, where we closely work even with other UN agencies. So in terms of addressing to ensure gender equality, I see it as a movement, and in this movement, every partner need to come together. It's also not only lies with the partnership, it's also about whole of society approach. The society, every actor of the society need to come forward, join their hands to kind of to the world we want to see, where gender equality will not remain as a concept, but will be reality. And partnership, whole of society, whole of government approach is also important. So whole of society with whole of government approach will help us to lead that gender equality is a reality, not remain an abstract concept.
Yeah, I mean, and let's also remember that partnerships for the goals is actually one of the SDG themselves, because, you know, this issue of partnerships across sectors, across individuals, across organizations is very much highlighted within the SDG concept, because it's the only way we can try to achieve these very, very big challenges. Neha, before I turn to Veronica first and then Professor Yamanaka, anything else you would like to share with us?
Yes, a very good question. You see, we are no longer living in a world where we can take global ideas and sort of fit them into national contexts. Instead, what we would have to do is try and understand what works nationally and use that to bring about inclusivity. And let me give you an example. So informal systems was often recognized by organizations like mine, international organizations, as breeders of crime, incompetence, etc., and unproductivity. But in India, informal systems, and we find that across in Asia as well, are actually breeders to bring different groups into the mainstream. So India has a footfall of about 12 million self-help groups, women self-help groups, and these were all started from an informal basis, and now those women are really contributing to India's success story on being of entrepreneurship, financial inclusion, the whole green transition, etc. So the point I really want to make is that something that was sort of discarded at a global level, in this case informal systems, actually works very well in certain countries at certain regional levels, and in this case India. So the message I want to leave is that we need partnerships, like Mahmud said, but for national strategies and national pathways. Thank you.
Veronica, your final words.
Thank you, Giulia. Very quickly, I agree with my fellow panelists. The challenges that we're facing are just way too large to be able to work on this alone. The financing of the net zero transition alone would take so much from all organizations. So it's really a whole of society approach that needs to be taken. The good news is that we are already making a lot of progress in terms of collaboration and partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. And now, over to you, Professor Yamanaka, for your concluding remarks.
Just before that, I just remember that Japan is really women's equality is very low. However, finally, we think that because of the aging society, we really need more workers, that is young people, women, and foreign workers. So I hope that Japan is changing. And also, everybody thought that US is far leading ahead. However, I would like to introduce a word of Professor Kenneth Galbraith, Professor of Economics of Harvard University. He's right, but it is really interesting because US is really different what it looks like. He said, actually, I met him 3 times. And in 1994, I met him for the first time as a professor of intercultural study university. And he said, Akiko, Japan and the United States have succeeded to produce excellent products. However, it is doubtful if we have succeeded to produce real happy people. When I met him in 1997 as a member of the parliament, he said, Akiko, there are 3 issues in the 21st century. One is the problem of the rich and poor. The second problem is the nuclear issues. Third problem is traditional discrimination such as religion, race, nationality, gender, and so on, where we are now. And the third time, in 2001, he was in a wheelchair. 92 years old professor stood up and said, Akiko, Japan should stop following the United States, but establish your own identity. He said 3 times, and it sounds like his will for me. So now I would say, let us walk and work together to establish our own identity, the ASEAN democracy. It looks a bit slow. It looks a bit loose. However, this is our identity. So we are proud of being to be Asian in order to produce real happy people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that there's nothing else we should add to this beautiful conclusion. Please remain with us. I think there's another link for session number 4 that will start just in 10 minutes. And thank you so much, all of you, for connecting with us, to our 3 amazing panelists, and to Professor Akiko Yamanaka for all your ideas during the last 45 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Giulia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.